As we focus on the election cycle coming up in front of us in 2014, the presidential cycle in 2016, there is a delusion. There's almost like a drunken inability to think clearly, that our very intellect is dulled by the tidal wave of sin that surrounds us. There is this illusion that we can continue on the path that we are on and not perish as a nation, or not have severe judgments from heaven come upon us. There are people who are literally collaborating with the demonic forces that want this country destroyed. I want you to think about Jeremiah chapter 18. Jeremiah said, if a nation is doing evil and I pronounce judgment on that nation and then they repent, God says, I'll forgive them. But he also said, if there's a nation who does good, or a people or a man who does good, and they turn from their good and then they do evil, God says, I'll bring judgment on them. It is arguable that America, with the exception of ancient Israel, was the most Christian nation in the history of the earth, sending out missions, funding works of kindness around the globe, a beacon of freedom, a beacon of hope. But we are not that nation anymore. Like the Jews of old who had David and Solomon, but then turned into wickedness and child killing and homosexual prostitution inside Solomon's temple. We are like ancient Israel who have turned. And because the mercy of God and the patience of God make him long-suffering toward us, we have this delusion that everything will be okay. There's a passage in the book of Jeremiah, I believe it's Jeremiah chapter 25, where Jeremiah stands in front of the temple and says, I have been preaching here for 23 years. And if you read the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah spoke of the Babylonian captivity, the destruction of Jerusalem, and it happened. But you know, when somebody prophesies for 23 years and it doesn't come to pass, the hearers are tempted to think, he's delusional. In other words, if John McCain or Karl Rove or any number of our GOP leaders, Chris Christie's of the world, if they had been around in Jeremiah's time, they could have scoffed. 23 years this guy's been saying it. Why are we even listening to him? I mean, you could have had a 20-year-old man go through on year one. 20 years later, he's got his own 15-year-old kid. And he can say to this teenage boy, I was coming here and he was preaching that stuff then. Anyway, let's go in the temple, have a prayer, and then we'll go down and get something to eat. Total disregard. But it came. But the callousness started from the top down. It functioned from the top down. In the next year, Jehoiakim, who was king of Judah, somebody took the words of Jeremiah. He was prophesying, and Baruch, his scribe, wrote them down and was reading them, because Jeremiah was in prison at the time, and Baruch was reading them in front of the temple. And then someone said, well, bring that scroll before the king. This is really important. We've got to have him hear it. So the king would have 3 or 4 sheaves read to him, and then he would cut them out with a penknife and throw them in the fire. Total, utter defiance. Defiance to the laws of God. Jehoiakim's body was thrown over the wall later on. And all of Jerusalem was destroyed. The temple, Solomon's temple, was destroyed. The blood of the babies that had been butchered, their blood crying from the ground for judgment and justice, was finally heard. And those in Jeremiah's day, and those in our day who say, we don't have anything to worry about, peace, let's go for economic prosperity, let's try and create jobs, and let's turn our back to the abominable sins of Sodom and Gomorrah. Let's plug our ears and close our eyes to the horrific murder of millions of babies, but let's just pursue prosperity. Or even those within the Republican Party and in the Tea Party who say, let's just make this about economics. They are false prophets, and they are collaborating with the destruction of this country. There is a God in heaven. He makes the rules. He will determine if we live or die as a nation. And he makes that determination based upon his law. As he said, to the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because they have no light in them. If they are telling us that it's going to be okay, while blood is crying from the ground and while sins that cry to heaven of the nature of Sodom and Gomorrah are like a cancer in the body politic, they're false prophets and they're collaborators with our doom. When I come back from this break, I want to talk to you about all sins not being equal and about the mercy of God for you, for me, and for our country. This is the voice of resistance.